Hello and welcome to the Georgia Bulldogs live show here on the Georgia Voice of College Football. I'm your host, Matt Green. I appreciate everyone who's tuning in live, everyone who's joining us this week. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Got something to say? Jump in the comments, and we can have it out on the comments, So that's what the people love. You can always follow me on Twitter at Matt_W_Green. Yeah, and hit me up and we can talk college football. But let's get started on tonight's show. And let's start with, I know you guys love this, more college football playoff expansion. Haven't you done enough? Is my thoughts on this. There's an article from Ross Dellinger. He was the first person I saw report this on Yahoo Sports. SEC and Big Ten are building momentum to further expand college football playoff to 14 or 16 teams. I just don't like it one bit. Folks. Call me old fashioned, I just don't like it. I mean, in this proposal that it's talking about, the SEC and Big Ten are like really driving this. They want a guarantee of 4 automatic qualifiers from the Big Ten and SEC each year. So that's 8 teams right there. I don't know if it goes to the 14 or the 16 team model. I guess either way, they're going to try to get 4 teams in. It's just, and also an aspect of this too is the SEC potentially going to 9 conference games, as well as then some sort of SEC Big Ten scheduling, commitment, I guess. I just don't like this one bit. I think, I've been a naysayer of the playoff, as much as anybody, playoff expansion as much as anybody. So obviously it's not shocking to say someone who didn't like the 12 team probably isn't going to like 14 or 16 teams. But I just don't know what we're doing in college football. Like ESPN runs the college football playoff, right? Like they obviously want to get as many teams as possible in this event that they run solo by themselves. But at some point, like, when is it enough? It's like the law of diminishing returns, right? At some point in your effort to, appeal to the widest range of college football fans, at some point you start to lose some of your diehard fan base. And we might already be to that point. I mean, I know a lot of people feel a certain way about guys getting paid. Like I felt a certain way about college football superstars being broke. Like that didn't make any sense to me. But just this current system it's an improvement for the players. Obviously, these guys are making hundreds of thousands of dollars and some making millions of dollars. It's obviously an improvement for them. But let's be honest, like, as much as people want to talk about fans like they're dumb and, oh, fans are just crazy, you can't take what they say into account. It's like, you sure as heck can. To quote Ricky Bobby, you definitely can. Like, fans are what make this sport what it is. Like, they pack out 90,000, 100,000 seat stadiums. Like, their opinion definitely should matter when it comes to this. And I think, a lot of fans they aren't into this. I think a lot of, when it comes to recruiting, a lot of people don't follow recruiting like they once did, because it's like, oh, okay, it could be about my team building relationships with players, and let's see who the best sophomores and juniors are coming into the next crop of talent. Or you could just see how much money your team is going to offer, and that's who they end up getting. And it's just, it makes the whole thing, it makes the message board chatter not quite as fun. The rumors, oh, well, I know a guy who went to high school with this guy, and he knows a guy who's his brother-in-law, sister. Oh, he's definitely going to commit to us. There's all kinds of things like that. Now it's above table. I guess that's better. They offered this much money. You heard Justice Terry say it, why he chose Texas over Georgia. He had been to Georgia, I don't know how many times, in like 3-4 years being recruited. Texas jumps in October, before signing day, and all of a sudden, offer him a great NIL package, and Justice Terry is a Texas Longhorn. And that's not to say that Georgia's not paying players and offering money. It's like, it is what it is. But I got off on a tangent there. There's just certain changes that at some point the core fan base that makes this sport go is going to get turned off by it. And I think I see a lot of people make this point all the time in terms of the playoff. The playoff works for every other sport: high school, Division II, FCS, NFL. Why can't they do it in college football, or FBS football, I should say? And it's just my only response to that. Like, that's true. Playoffs work in college, or I should say in high school, in the NFL, at other levels of college. But my only response to that is that college football is better than all of those other sports. So why would I want to make college football more like those other sports that I don't care about? That point doesn't make sense to me. So I don't know. I think when it comes to a 12-team playoff, like the NFL is doing 12 teams for years. Now they're at 14 teams. That works in the NFL. They're all playing other NFL teams. Like, that's not what we're doing in college. College football teams aren't playing NFL schedules. I mean, obviously, more difficult schedules is, with some of these expanded conferences, it makes for a lot more fun of a season. Like, I mean, it was a heart-wrenching season for a Georgia fan this past year, but this season was a lot of fun in terms of how many big-time matchups you saw your team play. But what wasn't fun was looking at Texas's schedule and being like, wait, where are all their tough games? Was looking at Tennessee's schedule and being like, where are all their tough games? It's some Ole Miss's schedule. There was a lot of teams out there. I mean, you had Ohio State played all of the college football playoff teams that were in the Big Ten last year, and Indiana didn't play any of them except for Ohio State. Like, Indiana had the one difficult game on their schedule and they lost and they got to the college football playoff. That's the biggest thing, is most teams are playing 3 to 4 really difficult games a season, some more, and like I said, some less. And if you lose 2 or 3 of those games, you're still in the playoffs. Like, I just don't think that's what college football fans want. Like, does that work in the NFL? Yes, that works in the NFL. You can lose 6 or 7 games and get to the playoffs, but this isn't the NFL. You're playing other professional football players, and that's just not the reality in college. The way these schedules are set up, everyone's got a handful of tough games, and now we're making a system where, okay, you can lose those couple difficult games you have and you're still in the playoffs. So, I mean, we look at college basketball. Like, college basketball is obviously, it has fans, but from a mainstream appeal, most people don't care about college basketball until March Madness, right? I mean, they become a sport that you don't care about until the postseason from a mainstream perspective. Obviously, there's diehards of the sport, but that's what the NBA is. That's why they have rules about how many games their players play in to win awards, because the best players know none of this matters. The 82 games that we're playing, yeah, we can determine seeds, but as long as we're a top 2, 3, 4 seed, we'll be fine. It's all about the playoffs. So I personally don't want college football to be more like those sports, because I think college football is the greatest sport in the world. And at 12 teams, I think we're already doing more than I wanted to do. I think 8 could have kept a lot of the preserve, some of the just the, I don't know what the term is, the sacredness of the college football season. And now it's just, I don't know. It's not the same way. I don't think this is the sport that college football fans want. Like, Ohio State, like, their fans may have been crazy for wanting Ryan Day fired last year, but they weren't just out of left field. Like, it was the worst regular season of the Ryan Day tenure last year. And that team was able to be in position to win a national championship. And that doesn't sit right with me. A friend of mine, huge Alabama fan. His mom's probably a bigger Alabama fan than he is. And I had a conversation with her during the SEC championship party over at an Alabama fan's house during the SEC championship. Don't worry about it. Okay. I was still watching the game. There's enough Georgia fans present for it to still be a home atmosphere. Um, but I remember talking to my friend's mom and I asking her the SEC championship, like, you think Alabama's going to make the playoffs? And her response was, I don't know why we would. We're terrible. Like, that was just a bad team and a good team when she sees it. And that Alabama team, they didn't have a good season. They could have still gotten in the playoff, and you could argue they should have been in the playoff over someone like SMU. But at the end of the day, they were a really flawed team that everyone knew in the history of this sport had no business competing for a national championship by the end of the season. It's like Ohio State had the most talented roster sport, and they dramatically underachieved through their regular season, and yet they were rewarded and ended up. And obviously, they played great, and then in the college football playoff, they looked like the best team in the playoff. But did they deserve a chance to be in the playoffs? So there's obviously people out there that just don't like change. And in college football, you have to be used to change at this point. Like, I think people talk about college football like in its tradition, college sports in general with its tradition, and I think kind of undersell how much the sport has always changed. I mean, the SEC went to 12 teams in 1992. The Big 12 didn't exist until like 6. So it's a sport that's always changing. And so, we're used to these changes. It's usually conferences changing, but with so many changes in this sport, I mean, it's reasonable for, like, those people are criticized, I think, that are afraid of change, but everyone has a point, and at some point, your favorite thing in the world can become so unrecognizable that it's no longer your favorite thing in the world. And I hope college football doesn't do that. Let's see. We got Jackson Johnson chiming in the live chat. What's up, Bulldog Nation? Jackson, I appreciate you watching live, tuning in. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let's move off to the next topic here. ESPN. Let me get my graphic on the screen here. ESPN had a story this week. I think it was Mark Schlabach that posted it. Most important game of the 2025 season, and he named Alabama as Georgia's most important game of the 2025 season for obvious reasons. It's a big time top 10 matchup in Athens and all that. But it's so difficult to truly pinpoint what Georgia's most important game is, because that most important, I don't think, is the same thing as biggest game. If I was saying Georgia's biggest game of the 2025 season, I think it's Texas. I think Texas is likely to be a top 5 team when they come into Athens in late November next year. But I believe it was Chuck Oliver. If you're a 680 The Fan listener in Atlanta, Chuck Oliver, I believe he said years ago, like, because people talk about must-win games, and it's like every game is a must-win game, because try losing those other games that aren't must-win games, and that's what it is when you look at Georgia's schedule. Like, yeah, Bama is a massive game, and just think about kind of what the storyline is, just from a narrative perspective. Like, Georgia loses to Alabama, it's Bama owns Kirby. It doesn't matter. Nick Saban, Kalen DeBoer, they own Kirby, and Georgia's got 31 game home winning streak. Also, to lose a game at home, haven't lost at home since 2019. So to have the winning streak, 31 straight games, I think it'll be 33 most likely with the 2 cupcakes to start the season. So Georgia's going to get that winning streak up to 33 straight home games. And I mean, losing to Bama at home would just be devastating. Kirby Smart has yet to play Alabama in Athens, Georgia. As crazy as that is, he's played Alabama 7 times, and not one time has it been in Athens, Georgia. So Georgia needs to return the favor of that loss a year ago that Alabama gave them. But then you think about Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is kind of the same thing. And also, I feel like Ole Miss is a worse team than Alabama in 2025. So it's kind of the same type thing. Now Ole Miss has beaten you 2 years in a row. Now Lane Kiffin Kirby Smart, this little rivalry of former Saban disciples, and the offensive guy beat Kirby for a second straight year. Like, that would be a terrible narrative to sit with. How about think about Georgia losing to Tennessee? How would that make you feel as a Georgia Bulldog fan? Heupel's first win over Georgia, like, you've won 8 straight games over Tennessee. At some point, that's going to end, and the tangible, like, stepping stone that would be for Tennessee's program. Like, yeah, they've beaten Alabama a couple times, and that's the best thing that Heupel has to hang his hat on. But you were also beating Alabama as they were getting worse and no longer winning championships. Then this different team that's on your schedule every year emerged that started winning championships. And that would be just so massive of a win for Josh Heupel in Tennessee. Third game of the season, too. It's really Georgia's first big game. So you're 2-0 if you go into that one, most likely. But you're essentially starting 0-1 if you lose to Tennessee. But at Tennessee is one of the more reasonable spots to lose. But I think Tennessee fans have gotten loud enough on social media and other places without beating Georgia. A loss of the Vols, we don't want that. And then Auburn is kind of the same story. They definitely don't have the under Hugh Freeze, they don't have the track record that Josh Heupel has at this point. 2 double-digit win seasons. That's what would make it even worse. Georgia's also beaten Auburn 8 straight times, and if Hugh Freeze is able to get him, that's one of Hugh Freeze's like first, signature wins of his tenure at Auburn. So you can't lose to Auburn. So that's got to be an important game. We talk about Georgia Tech game. Like, Georgia Tech took Georgia to 8 overtimes. I should say Georgia took Georgia Tech to 8 overtimes, because I don't know how Georgia ended up pulling that one out. So there is the aspect that Georgia Tech does tend to play Georgia better as opposed to in Bobby Dodd. But I mean, with how that game go, it's definitely, that Georgia Tech expects to beat 8-6 to them in 2024. Maybe Georgia's not quite as good in 2024 as well. So it's that's another angle, and it's just embarrassing to lose to Georgia Tech. Like, that's going to come off as disrespectful to the Yellow Jackets, but you can't be losing to Georgia Tech. So, like, is that the most important game of 2025? Probably not, because it doesn't impact conference standings. But, and then I haven't even gotten to the Gators. The Florida is Georgia's number 1 rival in my book. Like, as far as I'm concerned, there's no one that I value more than the Florida game. And this would be Napier's first win over Georgia. Georgia won 7 out of 8 against Florida. Like, not only would this be just a massive win for Napier, like, does this also mean maybe Florida's on the rise? Maybe Florida's turning into a college football playoff team. Like, Georgia had the toughest schedule in college football last year, with Auburn and Florida being bad teams. Like, Auburn and Florida aren't going to be bad teams forever. At some point, if Florida improves, and if that's this year, like, that becomes the most important game. So I named all those games, and haven't even mentioned Texas, who's, likely to be the number 1 team in the country. Like, maybe not from my perspective, but it's possible. There's going to be buzz about them being the number 1 team in the country. So likely a top 5 team at the very least. It could be a top 5 matchup with Georgia and Texas late in the season. And it's like a top 5 matchup in November has to be the most important game of your season, right? Like, normally it would be, because that would be an essentially a semifinal to get to the SEC championship, and ultimately, try to win it and try to win a college football, try to go to the playoff and win a national title. But now it's like, okay, it'll determine the team that goes to the conference championship most likely, but maybe the team that doesn't gets a 6 seed in the playoff, gets a 7 seed in the playoff, and they're sitting pretty. And That I think that's just what this college football playoff has done to the regular season. So I think ultimately I did a lot of talking, a lot of hemming and hawing over here, but I think I agree with Mark Schlabach. The Alabama game is without a doubt the most important game of the season. It's not only because it's at home, it's as early as it is. So to have a loss, and that's how I feel about Tennessee. Like you lose to Tennessee or Alabama, obviously two of the tougher opponents you'll play all season, but also both of those are the third and fourth game of the season this year. It's like you lose one of those games, you're putting yourself behind the eight ball a little bit. So, and on top of that, like Kirby's got to get over this Alabama thing. And if Alabama is able to beat Georgia this year in Athens, now it starts to feel like, man, maybe Kirby Smart really just has some sort of mental block about the Alabama Crimson Tide, and he can't beat him. Like Pedro Martinez said, you just got to bend over and call the Yankees his daddies. Like, hopefully Kirby Smart doesn't offer that soundbite to the Alabama Crimson Tide fans. But yeah, I think that is the biggest game of the season. I think that a win like that early in the season just makes you feel good, especially, if it's Gunnar Stockton, if it's Ryan Puglisi, it's going to be a pretty inexperienced quarterback's best win of his career. Most likely, unless if they beat Tennessee and Alabama and they're sitting at 4-0, which is definitely possible as well. So, yeah, I think Georgia's got to get over that Alabama game and start the season. I would say at worst 3-1. If they're starting 2-2, this season could get a little interesting. All right, let's shift topics now and let's talk about recruiting. The state of Georgia recruiting. I don't know if you see my banner there on the screen for my YouTube followers. That's a little double meaning there, pretty clever guy. State of Georgia as well as maybe, kind of a state of the union thing. Let's take a look at Georgia recruiting right now. But also the state of Georgia recruiting. And the other night, so I'm on the Chase Thomas podcast every week. We usually do it twice a week during the season, once a week during this every Monday during the off season. Chase Thomas podcast, and that's probably where a lot of my hatred of the Tennessee Vols comes from. Obviously, the Tennessee Vol hate, it runs deep, but I can't have Georgia losing to Tennessee now doing this podcast with him. As long as I've been doing it like 4 or 5 years. So that's why the Tennessee one sticks out a little more to me. But he made a point of talking about Georgia's in-state recruiting and how it's an advantage that Texas, this was his overall point, was that Georgia and Texas have an advantage kind of on what Tennessee will ever be able to do, just because those two programs can just knock it out of the park in in-state recruiting and put together a solid class. And put together an elite class just with in-state talent. And Tennessee can't do that in the state of Tennessee. And I think while that's a fair point, I think it kind of understates what Kirby Smart has really been able to build and how Kirby Smart has built what he's built at Georgia. Because the one thing that my friend Chase Thomas pointed out was that Georgia signed 21 of Georgia's 27 signees in the 2025 class were from the state of Georgia. That's 78% of the class. That is insane. And what took me back more than anything about that number was that is not how Kirby Smart has recruited basically the entire time he's been at Georgia. I throw out the 2016 class. I actually didn't even put him in my data, so I should look at that, what that number is. But it could have been heavier in state. But 2017 is basically the first true Kirby Smart class. You had Eason and Miko Hardman in that 2016 class to finish strong, but 2017 he was the full-time coach and he built that class, and that's Jake Fromm and Andrew Thomas. DeAndre Swift, Richard LeCount in that class. And 16 of those 25 signees were from the state of Georgia. That's 64%. And prior to 2025, that's the highest percentage of in-state talent Georgia has signed in a class. The next year, 2018, 54% was from the state of Georgia. And then in 2021, 50%. And that was the smallest class of the Kirby tenure. Only 20 signees in that class, and 10 of them were from the state of Georgia. So those 4 classes are the only classes that have 50% or more of the talent of the signees coming from the state of Georgia. And that's what's so interesting to me, because the state of Georgia is good enough that, yeah, you lock down the state of Georgia and you're going to have an elite class. But what I think is my friend was underselling when talking about Georgia recruiting the state of Georgia is how difficult it is to lock down the borders in the state of Georgia. I mean, you have a national championship winning program like Clemson. You have a national championship winning program like Alabama, like Auburn, like Florida State, like Florida. Go back to 98, and I know it's the 20th century, but go back to 98, Tennessee won a national championship. South Carolina is a team that has built a lot of their rosters on talent from the state of Georgia. There's not a state in the entire country that is just surrounded by big time college football programs like the state of Georgia is. And now you look at since Jeff Collins got to Georgia Tech, and now Brent Key, now Georgia Tech's actually a player for some of that talent in the state of Georgia, another Power 4 conference opponent in the state of recruiting against you. And obviously Georgia tends to get the guys they want when it comes to Georgia and Georgia Tech, but Georgia Tech is slowly but surely getting into the mix. And maybe they had to first start getting some of those players that, Kentucky and South Carolina were getting. But now Georgia Tech's starting to, recruit some of those guys that maybe Auburn was trying to get. Maybe the guys that Tennessee is trying to get. And so the state of Georgia is just so loaded. To see Georgia sign 78% of the in-state, or I should say 78% of their signees to be in-state recruits, that's just kind of unheard of in the Kirby Smart era. Like, you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, everyone talked about that team and the Georgia impact on that team. You look at the Georgia players on that team and where they were from. Nolan Smith was from Georgia. Jalen Carter's from Florida. Jordan Davis is from North Carolina. Keely Ringo's from Arizona. N'Kobe Dean's from Mississippi. Even Lewis Seen, who they signed on their practice squad late, he's from Texas. So Georgia's been recruiting guys from all over the country. 2024 players were from Georgia. 2023, only 5 of the 26 signees were from Georgia, 19%. That was actually the lowest number in 2023. 2022, it was 13 of the 30 were from Georgia. And those were the second and first and second and third ranked classes in the country. So Georgia is clearly still signing elite classes, and they have to recruit nationally. If they're able to, recruit the lock down the state of Georgia, I mean, it definitely just becomes that much more dangerous. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, to be honest. I think 2025 will tend to be more of an outlier. And you look at the 2026 class right now, and I was starting to say it's not that loaded. I mean, it is a loaded. There's always good players. There's like 10 guys that are like top 100 players in the state of Georgia for this class, but there's only one 5-star according to the On3 industry ranking is Tyler Atkinson, the number 1 linebacker out of Grayson. And I know Xavier Griffin from Gainesville, he's the USC commit. He's up there as well, but I don't think he's a 5-star. But right now, Georgia's got 5 commits in the 2026 class, and only one of them is from the state of Georgia. So I'm curious to see, how this 2026 class looks compared to 2025. Is Georgia making, more of an effort to lock down the state of Georgia, or is it just it's about getting the best players? And in 2025, some of the best players happen to be from the state of Georgia, but it's not like Georgia's, not going to sign big time players from other states as well. You had Taylor out of the state of Illinois. Like, the talent isn't always going to be from the state of Georgia. And you look at some of the best players. I'm just talking recent history with those Eagles players, but like you look at a Todd Gurley from North Carolina, a Matthew Stafford out of Texas, an Aaron Murray from Florida, a AJ Green from South Carolina. You know, a lot of Brock Bowers from California, Jalen Carter from Florida. A lot of the best players that have come through this program have not been in-state guys. So as cool as it is to lock down the state of Georgia, what's really cool is just getting the best talent from anywhere and everywhere, and Georgia's going to continue to do that. All right. Now, let's talk Georgia basketball. I'm going to finish it with Georgia basketball. Dogs are sitting at 16-10 on the season, 4-9 in SEC play. The Missouri loss this past weekend, not that it was a bad loss, because I think Missouri's a team, I don't have the bracketology sitting in front of me. Missouri's a team that's looking at like a top 5, top 6 seed or something right now. They're a ranked team. So obviously Missouri is a good team, but it was just the effort that I think Georgia put forth in this one. It was just so many second halves. The game has just gotten away from Georgia. They give up these runs and just kind of, and they don't respond with a run of their own. They just kind of, once the team has that big second half run, it almost feels like the team's waiting for that like second shoe to drop, you know? And so it's like, oh, this is the run. This is what does it. This is one that does us in. So it's frustrating. I think this team, you know, this is such a good team, and they just happen to pick the year where the SEC is just historically great. Like, they're, I think, in like 13th, 14th place in this conference. And I think right now the SEC is getting like 12 or 13 in. I think Georgia is that last one. And right now in Joe Lunardi's bracketology, they were in the last 4 buys. Then they were in the last 4 in. Now Georgia's dropped to the first 4 out. And so Arkansas is sitting at the last 4 in. I think Arkansas might prove to be the worst loss of Georgia's season. They're obviously a good team, but just the way they lost, they gave up the big lead down the stretch and just couldn't get a defensive rebound to save their life. And you know, and that Georgia hadn't won one road game in the SEC this year, and that's one they should have won. I mean, Arkansas is sitting there last 4 in. Georgia's sitting at 17-9 in Arkansas, and they had that win over Arkansas. They're probably a last 4 in. The one silver lining is that Georgia still has some data points left on the schedule. They, as well as you know, these could completely change the season. I can't even begin to expect a win, but at number 1 Auburn on Saturday, obviously you go beat Auburn on the road. Yeah, that's going to change everything. Georgia might get in the playoff. That'll be the best win, or in the tournament, I should say. I'm talking college football all the time. I say playoff. So obviously, if they can beat Auburn, that could be the win they need to get into the tournament. You don't beat Auburn, you got number 2 Florida on Tuesday. You know, maybe that's the game. And at least that one's at home. And so Georgia could potentially, you know, work some magic there. But they're going to need to play their best game of the season without a doubt. But I think more importantly than those two, they have Texas and Vanderbilt in the last 2 games of the season. Those 2 teams are currently on the last 4 buys for Joe Lunardi and his bracketology. So essentially 2 of the last 8 teams getting in the tournament. And if you're able to beat 2 other teams that are bubble teams like that, then, you know, that could be enough to sway you into the tournament and tip the scales into your favor. So, you know, we'll see. It's 16-10 isn't looking great. If Georgia can end up 18, 19 wins, they can get into the tournament. But and also the SEC tournament is going to be such a big deal. And if you get a couple wins in the SEC tournament, that could do wonders for your season. But you don't want to have to win games in the tournament to get into the NCAA tournament, and that might be the position that Georgia is putting themselves in. So that is all I have for this week. I appreciate everyone who's watching, everyone who joined us live. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Oh, one programming announcement. Next week, I will be coming at you Wednesday of next week. Uh, I will actually be at this Georgia Florida basketball game on Tuesday night. So won't be able to come to you Tuesday night, but I will come to you Wednesday, and then we'll be back Tuesday 8 p.m. Like we do every week. So I appreciate everyone who's joining us, everyone who's tuned in live. So like I said, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, go Dogs.